Please, mister, don't kick us out of here. The magnate Bruce Patterson visited his old derelict cottage, intending to tear it down, but what he discovered within changed everything. Stay until the end of this moving tale that reveals how a few small, unhomed kids, rejected everywhere, saved a life without even realizing it. Let's begin. The afternoon light filtered through the velvet drapes, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the Grand Lounge's air. Bruce Patterson remained still in his leather armchair, eyes closed, his gnarled hands resting upon his knees. At 70 years old, the man who'd built a wool and cattle empire from scratch felt like an outsider in his own home. The high ceilings, the gold leaf cornices, and the Persian rugs that muffled every sound now felt an unbearable burden. Every corner of that grand estate screamed Vivienne's name, his wife, whose absence was an abyss no wealth could fill. It had been just months since cancer took the woman, who was both his compass and his driving force. Since then, Bruce's every day seemed utterly meaningless. Luxuries held no special appeal to him. He didn't even enjoy his food anymore. He had spent an entire lifetime with her. Everywhere he looked, there was her memory, her laughter, her voice, her gaze, her warm companionship. She was gone forever, after a lifetime by his side. The window's light reached his eyes. Suddenly, he heard a sweet, cheerful voice speaking to him. "Come on, up you get, darling. Don't be lazy. It's already dawn. You know the early bird catches the worm." Bruce opened his eyes only to find the golden late afternoon sun illuminating his face. But no one was speaking to him. He was completely alone. "Ah, I fell asleep again," his monotonous, listless voice said, breaking the empty lounge's silence. Bruce no longer kept a schedule. He slept at any time, sometimes almost all day. "What's the point of waking now if I don't enjoy anything I do?" he thought to himself. He rose with difficulty, feeling his bones creak and the weight of a sorrow that settled in his chest like a stone. Approaching the large window, overlooking the meticulously tended gardens, where two staff members silently pruned the rose bushes. Vivienne adored. He no longer found beauty in flowers, only the stark reminder that everything that grows eventually withers. The sound of several vehicles approaching the driveway interrupted his melancholy. It was his children. Ethan, the eldest, came from the capital where he managed the family's financial arm. Mark arrived from his overseas business trips, and Chloe, the youngest, had briefly left her coastal city life to visit the patriarch. Bruce received them in the foyer, forcing a smile that didn't reach his tired eyes. The three surrounded him with quick hugs and gazes filled with genuine concern, yet also the impatience of those with packed schedules. "Dad, you look very pale," Chloe said, taking his hands tenderly. "You can't keep cooped up here, depressed. This house is too big for you alone, and the air feels stagnant." "Chloe's right." Ethan nodded, subtly checking his mobile phone. "We're worried you'll get sick at this rate. I know you love this house, full of Mum's memories, but clinging to the past like this can harm you. We've been talking, and we believe you need a holiday, a change of scenery, to clear your mind. You know, a barrier reef cruise would be a good idea, or perhaps a bush retreat in the Kimberley. You need looking after, Dad. We don't want you to fall ill from nurturing this grief." Bruce looked at his children and saw in them the success he and Vivienne had forged. They were decent men and women, strong and capable, but they lived in a different world from his. Their lives were complete. Their families no longer gravitated around that old gum tree beginning to shed its leaves. He felt more unnecessary than ever, a valuable antique piece of furniture nobody knew where to place anymore. "You're right, children," Bruce replied. His voice was a raspy whisper. "I've decided I'll take that holiday. I need to get away from all this, clear my mind, and find some peace." The children exchanged relieved glances. They thought their father was finally accepting reality and seeking a way to heal. They didn't suspect a far darker, more definitive plan lay behind those words. Bruce asked them to let him organize his trip alone, wanting absolute privacy to find himself. After a quick dinner filled with business talks and grandchildren's future plans, the children departed, promising to call once they knew he'd reached his tourist destination. When silence returned to the estate, Bruce headed to his study. On the mahogany desk, he penned a letter with a trembling but resolute hand. In it, he asked for their forgiveness for what he was about to do. He told them how much he loved them and left detailed instructions regarding the full administration of his assets. It was a farewell letter. His intention was not a luxury resort nor a cosmopolitan city. His plan was to take one last journey down memory lane, visiting the places where he and Vivienne had struggled together, ultimately ending at the site where he had first met her. The old timber cottage in the ranges, where their story began. The next morning, before the sun fully appeared, Bruce left the estate carrying only a small, worn leather suitcase. He drove his most modest car, one he rarely used, and departed from the private estate. His first stop was the wool processing plant, a colossal concrete and glass structure spanning several hectares. He paused before the main gates, observing the procession of trucks and smoke billowing from industrial chimneys. He recalled the day they bought their first second-hand sewing machine. Vivienne spent entire nights hunched over, stitching humble shirts while he sought clients in local markets. Back then, exhaustion was a badge of honor, and every coin earned tasted like victory. They had built it together with effort and strategy. Now the plant produced millions. He remained there for a few minutes and smiled, bidding farewell to that iron giant, representing the peak of his success. He continued his descent into the valley, where his vast property's fields stretched. Thousands of hectares of wheat and corn swayed in the morning breeze. Bruce stepped out of the car and walked a few paces along the roadside. He remembered when the land was an expanse of dry, hard earth nobody wanted. He and his wife had spent months removing stones with their own hands, sowing hope into soil that seemed barren. She always said the earth knew who truly loved it. Bruce felt a pang in his heart, realizing that the land would continue to bear fruit, but the hands that loved it were now beneath it. The sun began to warm intensely as he reached the city's oldest area, a neighborhood of narrow streets and peeling facades. There were the old shops he once leased with Vivienne. They were small premises, with low ceilings and a damp smell, where they sold their first homemade products. Bruce stopped in front of one, now transformed into a hardware store. He closed his eyes and could once again smell the aroma of freshly baked bread and the jams his wife prepared to entice customers. He remembered their laughter when rain leaked through the roof, and they had to use buckets to stay dry. They were poor, terribly poor, but they were immensely happy because they had each other. "Are you all right, mate?" asked a young man passing by on the pavement, seeing him so pale and absorbed. "Yes, son, just remembering a better time," Bruce replied with a sad smile. He got back into his vehicle. The nostalgic journey was physically exhausting him, but his determination did not waver. He left the city behind and began to climb a dirt track that wound towards the highest, most forgotten part of the ranges. As he ascended, the landscape became wilder and the air purer. Fruit trees gave way to eucalypts and bush scrub. The asphalt vanished completely, making way for a dusty track only those in the know traveled. The afternoon sun was still strong, for he had begun his journey very early. Finally, after hours of travel, he reached the place where it all began. It was a small plateau surrounded by wild bushland. There, almost hidden by overgrown scrub and years of neglect, stood the old cottage. It was a humble dwelling, made of grayish timber and damp. That was the refuge where Bruce was born and grew up in extreme poverty with his parents, the place where he met Vivienne, barely a teenager living in a nearby shack, a girl full of dreams and hopes for the future. As they grew, they fell in love, and she agreed to share her life with him. Despite him having nothing to offer but hard work, Bruce stopped the car a few meters from the entrance. The silence up there was different from that of the estate. It was a silence filled with wind's whispers and birds' songs. A silence that didn't weigh but enveloped. He stepped out of the vehicle, feeling his legs could barely support him. He walked towards the cottage, his heart pounding with unusual force. His plan: to light a fire at the back, lie in the corner where a straw bed once was, and by breathing the smoke for a long time, he hoped eternal sleep would claim him. With no one to stop the fire, everything would turn to ashes. He no longer wanted to fight, no longer wanted to build. He had no reasons left, and was tired. "I'm here, Vivienne. My journey is over too," he whispered, tears rolling down his wrinkled cheeks. However, looking more closely around, he noticed something strange on the ground. The entrance wasn't entirely overgrown, but a small path had been recently cut towards the cottage. He lifted his gaze to look further, and suddenly saw a small, beautiful garden with various astonishingly well-kept flowers. Bruce frowned, confused. That place was remote enough that no one would visit it, let alone decide to live there. Suddenly, 3 children emerged from the cottage, chatting among themselves as if it were daily routine. They held baskets in their hands and headed to the flower garden. They were 2 boys, approximately 10 to 12 years old, one slightly taller than the other, with slender, grimy bodies, as if they spent their days working. They looked after a younger girl. At first glance, she seemed about 6 years old. She smiled happily at the boys' jokes. The 3 little ones began to cut the flowers delicately. They were completely focused on their task, placing them in the baskets. Bruce, completely forgetting his purpose for coming to the cottage, decided to approach slowly. His steps rustled through the scrub and dry grass on the ground, alerting the children to his presence, who, upon looking up, froze as if caught committing a crime. "Oh no!" The eldest boy's voice was heard. They looked at each other with panicked expressions. "It must be the owner. What will we do now, Bruce?" In the short distance, he could hear the children's worried whispers. "Who are you kids?" Bruce managed to ask, softening his tone as he approached more slowly and serenely, appearing harmless so as not to scare the children. "Why are you out here, so far from everything?" "We don't have anywhere else to go," the eldest said, as if speaking for the other children. He stepped forward, shielding them. "I'm Finn, and that's my brother Jet," the first boy said, trying to maintain composure. "She's our younger sister, Ruby. Well, actually, we're all orphans, and none of us are real siblings, but we've decided to be brothers and sister, the three of us. We ran away from the children's home in the town below. There they hid us and forced us to work from dawn until we couldn't move anymore. The man who looks after us keeps all the money we earn selling stuff at traffic lights." Bruce felt a pang of indignation course through him. He knew the harshness of work well, but the idea of children being exploited in a place that should be their refuge ignited a spark of authority in him that he thought was extinct. He moved a little closer, and the children instinctively recoiled. "It's all right, I won't hurt you," Bruce said, searching his memory for the words Vivienne used to calm their own children when they were small. This cottage was mine a long time ago. I came here to destroy it. I didn't expect to find anyone here. This house is in ruins. How can you live in a place like this?" The children looked at each other, confused. To them, Bruce, in his dark, fine wool suit and leather shoes, seemed like an inhabitant of another planet. Jet, the smaller, dark-haired boy, pointed at the garden flowers. "We did that. When we got here, there was nothing but weeds. An old bloke showed us how to plant and care for them. We saw the cottage was empty and very ugly," Jet explained shyly. Finn again took the initiative to explain. "Jet and I fixed the roof with some branches and mud so Ruby wouldn't get wet from the rain. We've been growing flowers to sell them in the town below. That way we buy a bit of bread and milk. We don't want to bother anyone. We just want to be together." "It's all right, but you can't live here," he finally said. His tone was serious and a little annoyed. He was concerned about the children barely surviving alone in a ruined house, thinking they deserved a better place. But the children were frightened because to them it sounded like a homeowner announcing a cruel eviction. "Please, mister, don't kick us out of here. Seriously, if they find us, they'll grab us again. We have nowhere to go. This place is better than the streets," Finn pleaded. Bruce realized they had misunderstood him. "No, I'm not kicking you out. I just think you should live in a better place. I'll go to the children's home right now." "No, please, let us stay in our little cottage. We don't want to go back there," cried the girl, on the verge of tears. Jet put his arms around her, consoling her for being unable to prevent them from being returned. Bruce looked at them for a moment and understood that if he went then, the children would see him as the one who betrayed them and ruined their peaceful lives. He was going to sort out the children's home problem, but now wasn't the time. "All right, you can stay here if that's what you want, but you can't be here alone. It's dangerous without any adult to look after you." "I'll stay with you," Bruce said. His plan had changed. He would show the children he was someone they could trust and resolve everything at the children's home. "Really, mister?" Finn asked, surprised, still distrustful. "That's right. I'll look after you from now on, so don't you worry about a thing," Bruce said with a firm voice. Those words were simply to comfort the children. But for them, it was as if that old man was promising to be their family. While the two boys were still surprised and a little incredulous at the elder's kindness, Ruby's face lit up with hope. "So, will you be our grandpa now?" she asked with a smile. Bruce realized the promise he had just unconsciously made. He watched the girl, searching for words to explain he would only look after them until they could live happily in the children's home again. He didn't want to hurt her feelings. The afternoon light seemed to make her face glow, illuminating her large, deep eyes. In that pure gaze, in the way her lips curved into a shy, hopeful smile, Bruce saw a reflection almost identical to his beloved Vivienne when she was young. It was the same light, the same spark of life that refused to yield despite adversity. The magnate's heart, which he himself had condemned to death's darkness, gave a violent lurch. He felt air return to his lungs with a freshness he hadn't experienced since his wife's funeral day. Then, he knew he had to answer. "That's right. I'm going to be all three of your grandpa." "Yay!" Ruby celebrated, hopping and clapping, cheering that instead of facing a wicked homeowner, she had gained another member for their small family. "Jet, we have a grandpa now," she happily told her brother who was closer. "Hey, yes, it's true," Jet replied, a little nervous at the sudden news. Finn just smiled, watching her celebrate, but his heart remained anxious. He was a stranger. After all, Ruby ran to retrieve her basket, which had fallen to the ground earlier from the shock. She quickly picked flowers for a small bouquet and offered it to Bruce. "These are for you," Ruby indicated with a sweet voice. The little one was giving the most valuable thing they possessed. "Thanks for not kicking us out of our little cottage." Bruce accepted the flowers with trembling hands. The aroma of the flowers, a mix of pollen and freedom, flooded his senses. He realized that those flowers did not come from a controlled greenhouse, nor had they cost a fortune in a luxury florist. They were the result of the efforts of 3 children fighting to survive in absolute precariousness. "They're beautiful, little one," Bruce responded, feeling a knot forming in his throat. "Thank you very much." Finn watched Bruce's every reaction. Seeing how gently he treated the girl, he could sense he was a kind man. "Come with us. Since you're staying with us now, I'll show you where you can sleep." The old man was surprised. He was going to take them immediately to his estate, buy them new clothes and abundant food. But the children were calm only because they had assumed he would be the one staying with them in that old cottage. If he told them he would take them away, it might just cause them to flee from him. So he decided it was best to play along. For the moment, he entered the old cottage, following the children's steps. He looked around. He observed the precariousness of the sacks where they slept, the small extinguished fire in the room's center, and the total lack of comforts. He recalled his estate full of empty rooms, his service staff ready to attend to any whim, and his bank account overflowing with zeros, which couldn't buy him an ounce of the happiness emanating from that bouquet of flowers. "Sir, thank you very much for letting us be here and for staying with us," Finn said, turning to Bruce like a small household leader. "We'll work really hard. One day I'll repay this favor. I'll return it 1,000-fold," he said with a determination Bruce immediately recognized. It was the same courage he himself possessed when, as a young man, he decided he wouldn't let his family starve, no matter how hard he had to work. Finn continued speaking. "Jet and I are going to earn lots of money selling all the flowers. We'll save up to buy materials to sell more things to tourists. When we're grown up, we're going to fix this cottage completely. We'll put in lights, glass in the windows, and turn it into a luxury mansion for you to live comfortably. You won't have to be sad again." Bruce let out a short chuckle, a laugh that originated deep within his chest and physically hurt him from how seldom he used it. How had they noticed he was sad? It was a wonderful, cruel irony. 2 children who had nothing were promising riches to one of the country's most influential men. But in their words, there was no hypocrisy or self-interest. There was a pure love and a sense of gratitude Bruce hadn't seen in years, not even in the most distinguished social circles. "Are you laughing at us?" Jet asked, a little hurt in his pride. "No, I'm not laughing at you," Bruce clarified, wiping a treacherous tear that escaped his right eye. "I'm laughing at how blind I've been. I'm laughing because you have hearts bigger than any palace I've ever known." The magnate fell silent for a moment, looking towards the window where the sun was beginning to tint the sky orange and violet. The plan to close his eyes forever in that place had dissolved, replaced by a curiosity and a need he didn't quite understand. Those children needed him, but he realized he needed them far more. The solitude of his estate was a desert, but this ruined cottage, with these grubby-faced angels, was an oasis. "We've sold flowers during the morning. Since it's getting dark, we should stay here. Going back through the ranges with a torch isn't a very good idea for today. There's no light in this cottage, so we sleep early and wake with the sun. Tomorrow we'll go together to sell those flowers." "You'll see how the business goes," Finn said with a smile. Bruce smiled back. He remembered dreams where his wife seemed to wake him early, telling him to get up because there was much to do. These children had that same light in their eyes, the energy of someone who rises every day with a purpose, and now he had it too. He waited for everyone to fall asleep and tucked them in with blankets and his jacket so the night wind wouldn't reach them, feeling once more that fragile lives depended on him. The first sunbeam filtered through one of the timber cracks, hitting Bruce's eyes directly. The awakening was different from those of the past decades. There were no Egyptian silk sheets, nor the gentle hum of air conditioning, nor the aroma of gourmet coffee his butler usually left on the bedside table. Instead, he felt the cold contact of the dirt floor and the weight of a threadbare blanket that smelled of wood smoke in the bush. His back ached, a physical reminder of his age and the sacrifice of sleeping on such a hard surface. But upon opening his eyes, He didn't feel the dead weight of depression that had accompanied him since Vivienne's death. Beside him, the three children slept deeply. Ruby's head rested on Finn's shoulder, and Jet hugged Bruce's small leather suitcase as if it were a sacred treasure. The magnate slowly sat up, trying not to make a sound. He observed his own gnarled hands, marked by age, and then looked at the children's, small but already showing premature calluses from working in the bush. A strange warmth flooded his chest. "Grandpa, are you leaving already?" Ruby whispered, rubbing her eyes with her closed fists. Bruce smiled at her. And for the first time in a long time, the smile didn't stop at his lips, but reached his gaze. "No, little one, I promised we'd go sell flowers today, and a Patterson never breaks his word," he replied, helping her up. Breakfast consisted of a piece of stale bread the children had carefully saved, and some clear water boiled from a nearby creek. Bruce, the man who used to dine in Europe's most expensive restaurants, savored that bite, feeling how valuable the food was. There was something in the children's generosity, in the way they made sure to give him the largest piece. Before leaving, Bruce looked at himself in the reflection of a bucket of water. His designer suit was wrinkled and dust-stained. He removed his fine jacket and carefully folded it, hiding it under some sacks, not to attract attention. He unbuttoned the cuffs of his white shirt, rolled up his sleeves, and ruffled his gray hair. To any stranger's eyes, he was now merely a humble old man, accompanying his grandchildren. They walked uphill into the bush to collect the freshest flowers. Ruby guided him by the hand, showing him which were the hardiest and which had the sweetest perfume. Bruce watched her with his heart on a string. The girl moved with a grace that constantly reminded him of Vivienne. Every time Ruby found a wild orchid and let out a joyful cry, Bruce felt Vivienne was there, sending him a coded message in that creature's laughter. The emptiness he felt in his estate began to fill with the simplicity of that bushland. Once several bouquets were collected, they began their descent towards the nearest town. Finn and Jet walked with steady steps, carrying the baskets with a dignity that moved Bruce. They passed Bruce's luxury car, parked behind the scrub near the cottage. "Look out!" Finn yelled with an alert stance, looking around as if searching for someone. Jet and Ruby also started looking around fearfully. "What's wrong?" Bruce asked, confused by their reactions. He was about to pull out his keys to drive them to town, but Finn's response froze him. "Those kinds of cars usually belong to bad people. If you see someone near it, don't trust them. It must be that car's owner." Bruce was surprised. He didn't know what had made the children think that at their young age. But there had to be a reason. You shouldn't judge people by their possessions. Not everyone who drives those cars is bad. But you're right. It doesn't hurt to be cautious. Anyway, that's what I'm here for, to look after you. The children looked at him with relief, gladly accepting his advice and protection. They continued walking peacefully. Bruce put his keys back in his pocket. By no means was he going to let them think he was a bad person when the children had already begun to trust him. He decided to forget the car and experience life as the children did, walking, striving. Upon reaching the main square, the children settled in a busy corner. They asked Bruce to wait a couple of meters away. He was observing in silence. He watched many people pass by, ignoring the children's pleas. Some even looked at them with contempt, turning away as if poverty were a contagious disease. Bruce felt a dull rage bubbling inside him. He wanted to approach, buy all the town's flowers, and take the children to a safe place that instant, but he held back. He knew that if he revealed his power now, he would break the magic of what was happening. He needed to understand life from this perspective. Again, in the middle of the afternoon, they sat down to rest on a curbside. They had sold only 3 bouquets. Bruce's feet were swollen, and the sun had slightly burned his neck, but he didn't complain. "Don't worry, Grandpa Bruce," Finn said, wiping sweat from his forehead with his shirt sleeve. "Today was a slow day, but tomorrow will be better." "Yeah," Jet added with a gleam of pure ambition in his eyes. "We're saving every coin. When we have enough, you won't have to sleep on the ground anymore. We'll hire the best builders in the world. We're going to put marble in that cottage, like the palaces in movies, and we'll buy you a new suit, one that shines." Bruce let out a genuine laugh, a laugh that echoed down the street and made a couple of passers-by stop and look. It was the greatest irony of his life. 2 children, who didn't own proper shoes, were promising marble and luxuries to the man who owned half the country's quarries. "What are you laughing at, Grandpa? Don't you believe us?" Jet asked, a little hurt in his pride. Bruce embraced them both, pulling them to his chest. The smell of sun and effort from the children was far more real than the perfume of high society salons. "I believe you, kids. I believe you completely," Bruce said when he regained his breath. I'm laughing because it's been years since I heard something so brave. You have a spirit worth far more than all the gold in this city's banks." At that moment, Ruby approached and placed a small flower in his shirt lapel, right where he used to wear gold pins or honor badges. "So you'll always look handsome." "Grandpa," the girl whispered. "Grandpa," the girl whispered. Bruce closed his eyes for a second. In the silence of his mind, he heard Vivienne's voice. It was as if she were telling him, "See, Bruce, the world didn't end with me. These children need you, and you need their light, so you don't get lost in the shadow of my memory." That thought gave him a peace no medicine or therapy had managed to provide. Bruce had left his bank cards at the estate, believing he would no longer need to spend. He only had a couple of notes in his pocket that he sometimes used for tips. He spent it on food for the children to their astonished stares. "Grandpa, you had money?" Ruby said, almost drooling at the sight of the hot chicken soup placed before her. "That's right. It's the last I had left. I'll have to go get more," Bruce said, thinking that the next day he'd have to find a way to convince the children to leave that cottage. This is delicious," Finn exclaimed. "Yeah, it's so warm it makes me feel really comfy while I eat it," Jet said, who usually preferred not to speak due to shyness, but emotion had loosened his tongue. "Thank you so much, Grandpa. It's the best food I've ever tasted," Ruby said. "As long as I'm with you, I promise you won't lack for anything," Bruce said with a reassuring smile. Bruce felt very happy and at the same time sad that they were so thrilled over a simple hot chicken soup. He decided to just enjoy the moment and laugh with the children, enjoying a simple meal as a family. That night, back at the cottage, their living together grew more intimate. Bruce told them stories of his childhood, conveniently omitting his transformation into a magnate. He spoke of how he too had known hunger, and how he had met a wonderful woman who taught him that love was the only wealth that doesn't depreciate over time. The children listened with wide eyes, finding in that old man not just a protector, but a mirror of their own dreams. "And was she pretty?" Ruby asked, referring to Vivienne. "She was the most beautiful woman to ever walk this earth," Bruce responded, gazing at the stars through a gap in the roof. "She had your very eyes, Ruby. Eyes that could see beauty even in the darkest places." Before sleeping, the twins approached Bruce with a small metal tin where they kept their earnings. "Here, Grandpa, you hold the money," Finn said with complete trust. "We trust you. You're part of our family now." Bruce took the tin, feeling the weight of the low-value coins as if they weighed tons of responsibility. Those children were handing him everything they had, their livelihood and their future, without a second's hesitation. The magnate, who had always lived surrounded by contracts, lawyers, and guarantees, felt overwhelmed by that display of selfless faith. As the children settled down to sleep, Bruce stayed awake a while longer. He observed the cottage, that place he had wanted to turn into his tomb, and realized it had transformed into a temple of life. He no longer wanted to close his eyes forever. He wanted to wake up the next day to see Ruby smile, to hear the twins' grand plans, and to protect that spark of hope they had ignited in his withered soul. However, deep in his mind, he knew this peace was fragile. He still needed to see what had happened with the children's home, to verify if no other child had fallen into the hands of wicked people. But for that night, Bruce Patterson, the man who had everything and nothing, slept with a smile on his face, protected by the embrace of 3 angels who had taught him that true fortune isn't counted in banknotes, but in shared heartbeats. The morning presented with a leaden sky, heavy with a dampness that chilled to the bone. Despite the hostile weather, Bruce and the children were at the municipal market in the lower town. They had managed to collect a considerable quantity of flowers and small plants rooted in old tins. Bruce, his linen shirt now stained with dirt and his hands marked by farm work, felt strangely alive. Each time he helped Ruby arrange a daisy's petals or exchanged a knowing glance with the twins, the emptiness in his chest diminished a little more. However, the midday peace shattered with the screeching sound of tires on the wet pavement. A grey ute, scruffy but imposing, screeched to a halt abruptly in front of the children's makeshift stall. From the vehicle descended a burly man with coarse features and a gaze that exuded cruelty, fed by years of impunity. It was Mr. Crowley, the administrator of the children's home from which the little ones had escaped. Upon seeing him, color drained from Finn and Jet's faces. The twins stepped back, instinctively interposing themselves between the man and their little sister. Ruby dropped the bouquet she was holding and hid behind Bruce's legs, trembling with such violence that the old man could feel the fear vibrating through his own skin. "So here you are, you ungrateful little rats," Mr. Crowley roared. His voice was a whip that drew the attention of everyone present in the square. Thought you could hide forever in the bush, did you? You've made me waste a lot of time and money." The man advanced with heavy steps, ignoring the stares of passers-by, who, intimidated by his presence, began to move away. Mr. Crowley extended his large, calloused hand, seizing Finn by the collar of his tattered shirt. The boy tried to break free, but the administrator shook him with brutal force that ripped a groan of pain from him. "Let him go," Jet cried, lunging at the man's leg, only to be thrown aside by a swat that sent him sprawling onto the asphalt. Bruce felt something he hadn't experienced in decades, a cold, calculating fury. He straightened, and in that movement, his spine seemed to regain its youthful firmness. His eyes, previously clouded by melancholy, sharpened like newly forged steel blades. "Release the boy right now," Bruce said. His voice wasn't a shout, but a command imbued with such absolute authority that Mr. Crowley stopped, surprised by the tone of that seemingly destitute old man. "And who are you, you stupid old coot?" the administrator spat, releasing Finn to confront Bruce with a mocking grin. "Another vagrant, who fancies himself these delinquents' grandpa. Move aside if you don't want me to break the few bones you have left." Mr. Crowley raised his hand to strike Bruce, but the magnate didn't flinch a millimeter. Instead, Bruce reached into his pocket and extracted a small metallic device, a satellite phone he kept for emergencies. With blood-chilling calm, he dialed a speed dial number while maintaining his gaze fixed on the aggressor's eyes. "Bruce Patterson speaking," he said into the phone, and the name resonated in the square with the weight of a judicial sentence. "I need my legal team, the state police, and the press in the main square of the lower town now. And call the premier. Tell him his position depends on what happens in the next 10 minutes. Crowley was struck dumb. His smirk of superiority faded as he observed Bruce's face. He began to notice details he'd previously ignored. The quality of the watch the old man still wore beneath his dirty shirt sleeve, the way his mere presence seemed to dominate the surrounding space, and that name synonymous with absolute power throughout the entire region. "Bruce Patterson?" the man stammered, taking a step back. "No, you can't be him. The great Bruce Patterson is on holiday overseas. This is a joke." "The joke's over for you, Crowley," Bruce declared, advancing towards him. The administrator, who previously seemed a giant, now looked small and miserable before the magnate's dignity. "I've seen how you treat these children. I've heard their stories about your children's home, which is nothing more than a slave factory under your command. You will pay for every blow, every tear, and every coin you stole from them." Before Mr. Crowley could react, the sound of sirens filled the air. Several police cars and 2 luxury black sedans surrounded the square. From the vehicles descended men in dark suits and high-ranking officers who headed directly towards Bruce, disregarding the dirt on his clothes. "Mr. Patterson, your children informed us you had disappeared." "They were desperate," one of the lawyers said, bowing his head respectfully. "What are your instructions?" Bruce pointed at Mr. Crowley with an unwavering finger. "That man has committed atrocious crimes against children. I want him arrested immediately, and I want procedures started for the complete purchase of the land and rights to the local children's home by nightfall. That place will no longer belong to this monster, but to the Patterson Foundation." The police handcuffed Mr. Crowley as he cried for clemency, but Bruce didn't look at him once more. He knelt on the pavement, forgetting his pride and position, to embrace the 3 children who looked at him with a mix of terror and adoration. "Grandpa?" Ruby asked, her eyes filled with tears. "Are you really an important mister?" Bruce caressed her hair, feeling his heart beat with renewed peace. The revelation of his identity didn't distance him from them. On the contrary, it gave him the tools to be the shield they had always needed. "I'm Bruce, your grandpa," he whispered, "and I promise, no one will ever lay a hand on you again." Ruby hugged him back, but the boys remained silent with a look of deep sadness and concern. The sun began to descend behind the mountain peaks, tinting the horizon with strokes of fire and purple. Bruce, sitting on a stone bench with Ruby on his lap, felt the weight of fatigue on his shoulders, but his gaze remained fixed on the boys. Finn and Jet stood a few meters away, hands clasped and heads bowed. The revelation of the old man's true identity had raised an invisible wall between them. To the children, that humble grandpa who slept on the dirt floor had transformed into an unreachable giant, a man who moved the world with a single phone call. "Why are you so quiet, boys?" Bruce asked. His voice was a soft caress amidst the chilly air. "The danger has passed. That man won't hurt anyone again." Finn looked up, and Bruce saw in his eyes a sadness that hurt him more than any blow. It wasn't fear of the administrator, but fear of abandonment, of that loneliness street kids know too well. "Now that we all know you have lots of money, There's no point in anyone going back to the old cottage, Finn whispered with a lump in his throat. You have real houses with roofs that don't leak and good food. You sent to fix up the children's home to take us there, didn't you? Now that the children's home will be a good place, we'll have to go there. You won't need us to sell flowers for you anymore. Jet nodded bitterly, wiping a rebellious tear with the back of his grubby hand. What? That means Grandpa won't live with us. Ruby, hearing her brother, began to sob silently, clinging to Bruce's shirt as if it were her last lifeline in a raging ocean. The magnate felt his heart break into 1,000 pieces. He understood that for these children, his wealth was not a blessing, but a sign that their time together had ended. Before Bruce could respond, the roar of several high-speed engines shattered the town's calm. 3 high-end black utes braked violently near the square, kicking up a cloud of dust. From the first ute descended Ethan, his face contorted and eyes bloodshot from crying and lack of sleep. Behind him, Chloe and Mark ran towards their father, followed by a group of private investigators and police officers who had assisted in the search. "Dad!" Chloe cried, throwing herself at Bruce's feet, encircling his legs in a desperate embrace. "Oh God, Dad, we thought we'd lost you forever." Ethan approached, trembling from head to toe, holding a crumpled envelope in his hand. The farewell letter Bruce had left in his study. His hands shook so much that the paper rustled loudly. "How could you do this to us?" Ethan asked, his voice broken by anguish. "We found your letter 2 days ago. We've scoured every hotel, every hospital, every corner of the city looking for you. The police said you might have done something drastic. We were terrified you were alone, suffering, wanting to die without giving us the chance to tell you how much we love you. Do you have any idea how we would have been if something had happened to you?" Mark knelt on his father's other side, covering his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking with sobs. The emotional impact of seeing their father in stained clothes in a forgotten town, surrounded by unknown children, and with an appearance of fragility they had never seen in him, left them speechless. Bruce looked at his biological children and felt profound shame. In his grief over Vivienne's loss, he had forgotten that his life's value wasn't decided by him alone, but also by the people who loved him. Even if he felt he was useless, others still saw him as precious. "Forgive me," Bruce said, and his own tears finally flowed freely, tracing the wrinkles of his face. "I was so consumed by sadness that I was blind. I felt I no longer had a purpose, that my place was with your mother, and that you no longer needed me. I was a coward for wanting to leave you and end my suffering without considering how you would be left." Chloe lifted her head, looking at the 3 children who watched the scene with astonishment and shyness. It was the first time they had seen adults cry and didn't understand why. Chloe saw little Ruby, still hiding behind her father's arm, and the boys who seemed to want to disappear. "Who are they, Dad?" Chloe asked, softening her tone as she dried her own tears. Bruce gestured for Finn and Jet to come closer. The boys advanced with hesitant steps, intimidated by the elegance and bearing of the magnate's children. Bruce took them by the shoulders and introduced them with a pride that lit up his eyes. "They are my guardian angels," Bruce declared firmly. "When I arrived at the old cottage in the ranges to close my eyes and let go, they were there. They gave me a roof, shared their bread with me, and gave me flowers when I only had shadows. These children didn't let my heart stop. They taught me there's still beauty in the world, and that there will always be someone who needs a little love to keep going. Without them, I wouldn't be here now." The silence that followed was dense, charged with a purifying emotion. Ethan, Mark, and Chloe looked at the little ones with a new and profound gratitude. They understood that those children, in their poverty and helplessness, had achieved what all the money and influence of the Patterson family couldn't: return their father's desire to live. Ethan stood up and approached Finn and Jet. Despite his impeccable $3,000 suit, he crouched down to be at their level. With a tender gesture, he placed his hands on their shoulders. "Thank you," Ethan said sincerely. "Thank you for looking after our father when we didn't know how to. He is everything to us, and you gave him back his life. From now on, you'll never lack anything. You are part of us." Bruce stood up, holding Ruby in his arms. He looked at his 3 older children and then at the 3 kids. The bridge between his 2 worlds had been built with the tears of that reunion. "Children, I have a request to make of you," Bruce said, looking at Ethan, Mark, and Chloe. "I have decided I will not return to the estate alone. I am formally adopting Finn, Jet, and Ruby. They no longer have to worry about children's homes or selling flowers to eat. I want them to grow up with us, to receive the education they deserve, and to fill the halls of that house, which has been so silent, with laughter." The children's eyes widened, unable to believe what they were hearing. Ruby wrapped her little arms around Bruce's neck and buried her face in the old man's shoulder, crying with happiness. "Will we really be a family?" Jet asked in a whisper. "Forever," Bruce replied. "And the old cottage won't be demolished. We'll fix it up to be a beautiful place, a reminder of where we came from and how love found us in the midst of the storm." Chloe approached and hugged the children along with her father. And soon Ethan and Mark joined the group hug. In the middle of that humble square, surrounded by police and onlookers, the Patterson family rebuilt itself from the ashes. The biological children accepted the little ones with genuine affection, understanding that love doesn't divide but multiplies. Weeks later, the Patterson estate was no longer a mausoleum. The sound of Ruby's feet running through the gardens and the twins' voices studying in the library had returned the soul to the property. Bruce no longer spent his days sitting sadly in front of Vivian's portrait. Now, each time he looked at the painting, he felt she smiled approvingly at the garden of lives he was cultivating. The children's home had been transformed into a center of excellence, a refuge of peace for hundreds of children who now had a bright future thanks to the vision of a man who returned from death to give life. Bruce walked through his estate's garden, wearing a small wild flower in his jacket lapel, the same one Ruby had given him on the street. He knew his days on Earth held a new and powerful meaning. He was no longer just the owner of a wool empire. He was the grandpa, the father, and the protector of a new legacy. Loneliness had departed forever, defeated by the simplicity of three angels who taught him that, as long as there is someone to love, there will always be a reason to wake up the next day. If this story touched your heart, support us with a like, leave us in the comments what inspires you to wake up each day. We would love to read you. Subscribe so you don't miss new exciting stories. See you in the next story.